How much is there a buzz within the facilities around the snitch line in general?
You know, I mean, you hear Rudy Gobert saying that he thinks that it's just a little bit petty and he doesn't really expect to be using it. You hear Dante DiVincenzo with the Bucks saying he understands why it's there. He thinks it's a necessity, but he doesn't really see himself using it. And then you got Doc Rivers out here wild and saying that he's going to be calling it on every team until the Clippers are the only one left. But in all seriousness, I mean, there are signs that are posted all around campus that say, if you see someone who is committing some sort of violation, this is the number that you can call. And also on the back of credentials for every media member, every player, every coach, there is a barcode you can scan in the app to report a violation. And to be honest, we need to retire. I agree with what Jalen said on Get Up this morning. We need to retire. It's called the snitch line, because this line is put in place to report people not wearing a mask. I know I'm not wearing one right now, but there is nobody else around me and I am outside. I've seen people inside who aren't socially distancing, who aren't wearing a mask. And what, in a power imbalance, who is going to walk up to a player who makes significantly more than them, who is in a significant position of power over them, and say, hey, you need to follow the rules for all of our safety? It's safer to do it anonymously.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why it's put in there. You're right, it needs rebranding in this situation. So we'll get to work on that. But you mentioned you're outside, so where are you at in this process? You're really one of the first people we've seen make this foray into the bubble. So where are you at in this process, and now what are you allowed to do as you've gone through the protocol?
Yeah, so I cleared quarantine. I can't even remember what day it is, to be honest with you, gentlemen, but I cleared quarantine over a week ago. We'll go with that. Maybe we've been here for 2.5 weeks, I think. I'm starting to lose track of time in here. But I'm essentially allowed to roam around the campus. But remember, the hotels are kind of spread out, so you can't just walk across the street to another hotel that houses other staff or teams or players or whomever. I'm kind of confined to the hotel that I'm staying at, which also houses teams. And then I go to practice. I go to about 2 practices a day right now. I'm kind of meandering around, kind of seeing what there is to see, watching guys fish. That's become a very popular activity during their downtime. But I really don't have as many restrictions on me now that I have cleared quarantine. My food is no longer delivered to my room. I can get that at the restaurants on campus. I can order from the pre-approved restaurants through the campus app. That's different than Uber Eats. That will get you in trouble because they're not necessarily following the protocol that the league has set.
Well, I tell you what, there have been some nice bass pulled out of those lakes. There's no doubt about that. I've been very intrigued by that. So, Malika, again, going back to the line that they can call, and, you know, everybody is having their fun with it to an extent. But we saw a couple of guys inadvertently, they say, break the rules, and it cost them 10 days of quarantine. I'm just wondering, if there is somebody who calls that line and said so-and-so wasn't wearing a mask or something like that, and that person admits that, is there discipline to that? Is there, well, if you didn't, because you didn't have your mask on for a while, that was unsafe, you have to go back into quarantine? Is there something like that, or is it just basically, hey, wear your mask?
Well, there's certainly some tiers, right, to the potential consequences that you faced. If you were to leave campus and be directly exposed potentially, even though it was an accident that those players did that, if you were to be put in a position where you were exposed, like they potentially were, to folks who haven't been tested every day, that is why they were put back in quarantine, and it was that severe, because the NBA can't risk having someone be infected and walk around and have that be a breach of the bubble campus. But if someone, for instance, wasn't wearing a mask, they were on campus, they're walking around and potentially only interacting with other people who have been routinely testing negative, for them, they would get an official warning from the league that comes in either written form or via a phone call, and it's an official warning. It's not something you can just brush aside. It's a couple strikes and you're out, but there are definitely tiers to the kind of consequences that one would face.
We're talking to ESPN NBA reporter Malika Andrews. She's down in the bubble in Orlando. It's Golic and Wingo. Jason Fitz in for Trey Wingo with Mike Golic Jr. Malika, you mentioned you've been going to a couple of practices a day. I'm really curious, after the layoffs and how long it's been since guys have been together, how does the basketball look so far?
Well, there's a range, right? You have Giannis Antetokounmpo after one of the Bucks' recent practices being I would say a little hard on himself, saying that he really felt like he did not play well at all, but we all know that Giannis has an incredibly high standard for himself. And then you have folks like Victor Oladipo who's saying, these practices have finally given me the ability to get my legs under me to the point that I may even feel comfortable playing this season, even though I ruled myself out a couple of weeks ago. And then you have folks like Kemba Walker. I was at the Celtics practice yesterday, and he was sitting on the side because right now Brad Stevens said he's on a plan where it's every other day he's practicing, and he'd just done an incredibly hard workout the day before. So there's definitely variance to the levels of basketball that's happening, but it's slowly but surely improving, and that's what the scrimmages are for, to kind of get those basketball legs back underneath guys.